So you want to own a pool supply store. On paper, it might be the last honest business in America. There are roughly 14 million pools, spas, and hot tubs in this country, and every one of them is a chemistry experiment that fails if nobody intervenes. Water doesn't care about interest rates. Algae doesn't wait for the housing market. You sell chlorine to people who physically cannot stop buying chlorine out of a strip mall unit with your name over the door. That's the pitch. The pitch isn't wrong. Here's the problem with it. The largest pool supply retailer in the United States has been running that exact business for 63 years out of nearly 1,000 stores. In the last 18 months, it has closed 80 of them, been dropped from a stock index, executed a 1-for-20 reverse split to avoid getting delisted, and started fielding questions from reporters about Chapter 11. If the model is that good, somebody should probably tell them. At the bottom of this market, a working pool supply store in suburban Michigan recently listed for $84,900. 1,800 square feet, $1,750 a month in rent, $25,000 of product on the shelves. You could buy that with a home equity line. At the top, opening a new Pinch A Penny, the biggest pool retail franchise in the country, runs between $500,000 and $850,000 all in, and they won't return your call without $150,000 liquid. Same product, same customer. A 10-to-1 spread on the price of admission. Underneath both numbers sits the rule that actually governs this business, and nobody selling you a store leads with it. You pay rent 365 days a year. You make your money in about 100 of them. Call it the 100-day year. Everything else in this video is downstream of it, so let's price it out. What it costs to open the doors, what's on those shelves, and why it's more dangerous than anything else in that strip mall. How the money is actually made, which has almost nothing to do with selling chlorine. And why the biggest threat to a pool store in Ohio is a chemical plant in Louisiana you've never heard of. Start with the build. Physically, this is a cheap store to open. 2,000 to 3,000 square feet in a strip center with real parking, because your customers arrive for 50-pound buckets and they aren't hauling those across a lot. Rent in most secondary markets runs $2,000 to $6,000 a month. Shelving, counter, point of sale, signage, testing station, $20,000 to $60,000. Entity, licensing, insurance, another $5,000 to $10,000. Call it $100,000 to have something that looks like a store. Then you have to fill it. And this is where pool retail stops behaving like other retail. Because in this industry, inventory isn't a line item. Inventory is the business. Take a real one. A pool and patio retailer near the Philadelphia border. 27 years in operation, 11 employees, $1.5 million in annual revenue. The inventory sitting inside that building is $600,000. 40 cents of every revenue dollar, bought, paid for, and waiting. You're not opening a store. You're opening a warehouse that happens to have a register near the front. And that warehouse comes with rules most retailers never have to learn. Because what you just spent $250,000 on is, legally speaking, hazardous material. And if the wrong two products in your building ever make contact, they don't make a mess. They make a reaction. Trichlor tablets and calcium hypochlorite granules are both chlorine. Both sanitizers. Both stocked in the same aisle of every pool store in America. Put them together, and you can get spontaneous ignition and chlorine gas. So the fire code follows you around. Depending on jurisdiction, incompatible materials above about 5 pounds have to be separated by 20 feet, or by a non-combustible partition, or locked into approved cabinets. Placards at the entrances. A fire marshal who signs off, then comes back to check you're still doing it. The Consumer Product Safety Commission documents roughly 4,500 emergency room visits a year in this country from pool chemical incidents. Your inventory is your largest asset, your largest liability, and the only thing in the building capable of starting a fire without any help from you. And it does all of that while sitting completely still for most of the calendar. So here's the 100-day year. In numbers, you can check yourself. Leslie's fiscal first quarter ended in early January. Revenue, $147 million. Net loss, $83 million. The following quarter lost another $52.5 million. Half a fiscal year, $135 million in losses. That's not a company failing. That's the shape of the industry showing through. 2/4 underwater by design, every year. Because nobody in Cleveland is buying algicide in January, and the landlord doesn't care. A national chain absorbs that with a balance sheet. You absorb it with your savings account. Every owner outside the Sun Belt runs the same arithmetic. Whatever you clear between April and Labor Day has to carry payroll, rent, and your own household until the following spring. Miss that window, a cold June, 3 straight rain weekends, a competitor opening 2 miles down the road, and there's no makeup quarter. The season is the year. If you're getting something out of this, go ahead and subscribe. It genuinely helps. So how does anybody make real money in 100 days? Not by selling chlorine. The chlorine is the receipt. What you're actually selling is a diagnosis. Walk into any pool store in the country and there's a counter with a machine on it and a sign offering a free water test. The customer brings in a jug of their pool. You run it. 60 seconds later, they're holding a printout covering 10 parameters: pH, alkalinity, calcium hardness, stabilizer, sanitizer, plus a treatment plan naming the exact products to buy in the exact quantities. Leslie's built the industrial version of this and has run more than 50 million of those tests. 50 million times, somebody stood at a counter holding a piece of paper while a machine told them what was wrong with their water. That's the entire business, and it works for a reason worth respecting. The customer genuinely cannot do it himself. Pool chemistry is unforgiving and slightly counterintuitive, and a man staring at green water on a Saturday in June is not comparison shopping. He's rattled. He wants somebody to tell him what to do. So you give away the diagnosis and you sell the prescription. Every jug that lands on that counter is worth $60, $80, $120, and it walked in on its own. That's the good news. Now here's what happened to the company that did it better and longer than anyone else alive. In 1963, a man named Phil Leslie opened a pool supply shop in a shack in North Hollywood with a partner named Raymond Sesmat. According to his son, Phil Leslie never learned how to swim. It worked anyway. Post-war California was filling its backyards with concrete and chlorine, and the company spread across the Sun Belt. By the late 80s, it was around 70 stores and roughly $58 million a year. Then his partner got divorced. Sesmat owned half the company and needed to cash out. Leslie refused to sell. The deadlock went to Los Angeles Superior Court, and under an obscure California statute covering 50% owners, the court ordered the entire company sold out from under both of them. When Leslie was judged to be interfering with that sale, he was fired from the business carrying his own name. A private equity firm bought it for a reported $17.5 million and put about $20 million in debt on it in the process. Leslie was paid $9 million for his stake and spent the rest of his life saying he'd been lowballed. What followed was a 35-year loop. Public in 1991, private again in 1997, sold in 2010, sold again in 2017, and public a second time in October of 2020, riding a pandemic backyard boom with talk of a $3 billion valuation. The stock peaked near $33 in 2021. In February of this year, it traded under $1. The company now carries roughly $750 million in long-term debt against about $61 million in adjusted earnings, a leverage ratio near 12.5, where anything above 5 is considered high risk. Phil Leslie died in 2022 at 87. His son says he never truly got over losing it. The stores didn't kill that company. The financing did. Stocking a shelf in this industry. In August of 2020, Hurricane Laura came ashore in Louisiana and struck a chemical plant in Westlake owned by a company called BioLab. The facility had been evacuated ahead of the storm. It caught fire anyway. It burned for 3 days, taking with it a reported 800 tons of trichlor, the stabilized chlorine tablet that is the highest volume product in your entire store. The United States had exactly 3 domestic producers of that chemical. One had just burned down. About a third of the domestic supply vanished. Imports were already squeezed by tariffs, and the pandemic had just put a record number of new pools in the ground. By April of 2021, chlorine prices were running about 72% above early 2019. A 50-pound bucket that had sold for $109 was listing near $170. Distributors rationed. Stores posted purchase limits. BioLab spent $170 million rebuilding. Then on the 29th of September, 2024, a sprinkler head malfunctioned at a different BioLab plant in Conyers, Georgia, and dripped water onto a water-reactive chemical. 17,000 people evacuated. 90,000 sheltered in place. Interstate 20 shut down. The warehouse was destroyed. BioLab decided not to restart manufacturing there at all. Your best-selling product comes out of a handful of plants in this country, and 2 of them have burned inside 5 years. You have no contract, no leverage, and no substitute. You just get an email about pricing. There's one more structural problem, and it's the one independent owners bring up first. The largest wholesale distributor of pool supplies in North America is Pool Corporation. $5.3 billion in annual sales, 400 sales centers, and it owns the 2 biggest equipment distributors in the country. It is, in all likelihood, where you'll buy nearly everything you sell. Pool Corporation also owns Pinch A Penny, the retail franchise chain, which means the company supplying your inventory also runs stores that compete with yours, in your market, on your street. Meanwhile, your customer can price check every item you stock against Amazon while standing in your aisle holding it. And new pool construction ran just under 60,000 units in 2025, roughly half the pandemic peak. So let's run it clean. Scenario 1. You buy an existing store. Real listings right now. A Florida franchise doing $823,000 in revenue with $144,000 in earnings. Another doing $1.18 million with $238,000. 17 to 20% margins on a business somebody else already built. Scenario 2. You open new. $100,000 to build it, $200,000 to $400,000 to stock it, and a first summer with no customer list and no reason for anyone to walk in. Most new operators are 2 to 4 years from those margins, if they get there. Scenario 3 is the one that actually works, and every profitable listing in this industry has the same shape. You stop being purely a store and bolt on a service route. Weekly maintenance is contracted and recurring. It bills in December when the retail floor is dead, and the repairs it surfaces carry 40 to 60% margins. The retail isn't the business. It's the front door to the business. If you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe. We do this every week. So should you own one? The demand underneath this is more durable than almost anything else we've priced out on this channel. 14 million bodies of water, an installed base growing 1 to 2% a year, and industry estimates putting maintenance at nearly 2/3 of a $62 billion market. That money doesn't check mortgage rates before it gets spent, but you don't get to just stand in front of that river. You reach it through a 100-day year, 6 figures of flammable inventory, a supplier who competes with you, a chemical supply chain that has burned twice in 5 years, and a customer holding a phone. And the company that did this longest and biggest, 1,000 stores, 63 years, the name of a man who never learned to swim, wasn't taken down by any of that. It was taken down by the debt bolted to it by people who never sold a bucket of anything, none of which changes what happens tomorrow morning. Somewhere in America, a guy is going to walk across a strip mall parking lot carrying a milk jug full of green water. He's going to set it on a counter, and he's going to ask a stranger to tell him what he did wrong. That's the business. That was always the business. The chlorine is just the receipt.